Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. My name is Erin Flynn, and I'm the Creative Economy Development Officer with the Cape Breton Partnership, and I'm just here to host the webinar today. Before we actually get started with the webinar, I'm going to ask my colleague Jeremy to describe some of the functions of this platform.
Thank you very much, Erin. Welcome, everyone. Thanks a lot for coming out today. We're using the Zoom platform for this webinar, and it'll enable us several opportunities for you to ask questions and let us know if you have anything that you need to know, if you're having technical difficulties. Down below, you'll see a tool that says Q&A. If you have any questions for our panelists today, please feel free to click that button and type in your question. We'll be holding questions until the end of the presentation, but you'll be able to leave them there, and we will get to them in due course. There's also a chat function below. If you have any technical difficulties or want to leave a comment for our panelists, you can also do that there. In that tool, I'll also leave our email in case you have any trouble or in case you have any technical issues of any kind. In the meantime, we'll be checking in sporadically and letting you know to leave questions and to let us know how things are going. And if you have any questions, please do let us know. Erin, I think I'm going to hand it all over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeremy. So as we all continue to navigate this new and challenging world of COVID-19, our hope is that Cape Bretoners are staying healthy and safe. One of our primary purposes at Cape Breton Partnership is to connect Cape Breton entrepreneurs and companies from any industry to supports, information, and resources they need to be successful, which includes creating today's webinar. If you missed the previous webinars we've done, you can watch them on our website, capebretonpartnership.com. They cover topics from social media marketing to legal concerns and cybersecurity. On our website, there's also a host of COVID-related resources available, which we update regularly with information from all levels of government. These webinars always go better with lots of questions, so as Jeremy mentioned, please feel free to put your questions in and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. It's also a way that you can let us know if there's future topics you'd like to see, because we are trying to make these tailored to what the business community actually needs help with at the time. After the presentations, I'm going to start the questions off and then we'll open the floor to the questions. So feel free to put them in during the presentation, but if we don't get to them at the end of the webinar, we'll make sure to try and include them when we post the webinar after the fact. So I'd like to start things off by introducing Helen is a clinical social worker at Cape Breton University and a private practitioner with her own counseling and consulting services. Helen, you're welcome to come on screen and start sharing your presentation.
And while Helen gets ready, I just want to remind everyone that while we do these presentations, you don't have to worry about your microphone or your webcam. All other microphone webcams will be off except for the presenters. Helen, I think it's all up to you.
So, my name is Helen, and as Erin said, I'm a clinical social worker, and I have my own private practice, and that is where I do the majority of the work with the community, especially with the business community. So what we're going to talk about today, we are going to go over a couple of things. We're going to talk about the impact of the pandemic and the crisis that we're experiencing with COVID-19. We're going to discuss some of the possible reactions that people experience during times of trauma. And we will look at the impact of how that looks like for the business community when folks are working from home. We'll discuss some practical considerations. We'll examine how to manage some stressors, and we'll discuss some ways to provide support to others, and especially looking at how do we support children when they're worried. We're going to look at some of the additional supports, and hopefully this will keep you covered during the rest of our COVID isolation. So again, we're living in very complicated times. This is something we never expected before when we look at how things have progressed with COVID-19. We are in the middle of a national pandemic that is resulting in a state of emergency. And this is something that is not only impacting us as Nova Scotians, it's impacting our country and the rest of the world. So with our state of emergency, schools are shut down, many businesses have closed temporarily and may be facing financial jeopardy. There's many people who are they're either out of work right now, they may be working from home. We look at the fact that businesses have either shut down, some businesses have shifted and they've moved into more of a job sharing routine. And that impacts both the folks that have lost their jobs as well as some of the folks that still remain in the workforce, because then they have to take on more of the workload and shoulder some of those responsibilities. And then we have people that are needing to work from home, and we need to work in an environment where safety is important. And the folks that are still out in the public, their safety sometimes is questionable. The impact of the pandemic may have some people feeling this is a time to have calm in their lives. Maybe this is a time people think that they can relax, they can reflect, they do cooking at home. We see all of our shelves right now are empty from flour and sugar and baking needs, and they feel positive about some of those things. For other people, the pandemic may result in feelings of complete isolations, feelings of insecurity, financial stress, and vulnerability for people that we care about, especially some of the elderly folks or folks that are more, there's complicated issues. So maybe it's a child that has asthma. Basically, though, life as we know it has shifted significantly and people are impacted in many ways. Now, regardless of the situation, change, whether it's positive or negative, change creates stress in people's lives. So what are some of the common stress reactions that people may experience? We experience it in different ways in our bodies. So one of the first ways I want to talk about is an emotional response. When we are feeling emotional responses, there's many aspects that people may be experiencing. Now, these are some common stress reactions, but please keep in mind that not everybody will share the exact same stress reactions because it's all individualized depending on our own personal experiences, our life experiences. So some people may experience some of these things. Some people may experience many of these things, but you may be able to relate to some of these stress reactions. So emotionally, some people might feel anger. They might be angry at either the situation or the event. And especially when we think about we're experiencing the pandemic, and then on top of it, we've had a lot of tragedy in our province in the last week or so, and in the Atlantic provinces altogether. Some people might feel anger about this. Some people, a tremendous sadness. There are some folks that may be in denial about things. They might be saying things like, I can't believe this is happening. This cannot be happening to us, especially in a time like this. Some folks demonstrate feelings of anxiety, of helplessness, and there are some people that just feel completely overprotection for people that they love and care about, especially when it comes to our children and people that they feel are more vulnerable. Now, some other common stress reactions we feel physically. So again, we feel that in our body. Some examples of physical stress reactions are muscle aches, pains, and tension. Some people have stomach issues and heart palpitations. Some folks feel insomnia, exhaustion, or restlessness. Now, behavioral changes, that may be things like changes in appetite. Some people have changes in sleep patterns. So for example, some people might fall asleep easily at night, but if they wake up in the middle of the night, they have a hard time going back to sleep. And I hear from many parents, especially, that if you have teens, they may have changed their sleep patterns altogether. So maybe they're not going to bed until 3 or 4 in the morning and then sleeping half the day. There's also a tendency to blame or criticize others at times like this. And I think we can all relate to different situations where we feel, whether it's through social media or whether it's just in general conversations, where people feel this need to blame and criticize how other people are handling situations. Some people feel a sense of irritability, and they might not know why. They just might feel like they're just going to snap at somebody. Now, withdrawal is another common stress reaction. Withdrawal comes in several forms. So we may have people that withdraw socially. where they may not be talking to their friends as much, or you may not be hearing from certain family members. But withdrawal can also happen even when you're living in the same household as somebody. So perhaps somebody keeps going off to their bedroom and they just are just spending time by themselves. For other people, they might be sitting in the same room, but they seem like they're checking out, and we can't figure out what is going on when that person feels that like they're there, but they're just not there. We also see some people with increased consumption of alcohol or drugs. And again, during times like this, the tendency is that people want to numb the pain. So using more alcohol or drugs to numb the pain is something that we do often see when it's a common stress reaction. Thinking process is another way that people are impacted. So for example, some folks feel a loss of concentration. Maybe they're feeling very forgetful, like they might walk into a room and forget what they came in for. Some people might be very indecisive about things. So for example, they might have a hard time figuring out what to even have for lunch. Other folks may feel a sense of confusion. They might have distressing dreams. So again, they might not be dreaming about something specific about an event, but they wake up and they feel very upset after their dream and they don't know why. Now, there's other folks that may have recurring intrusive images about an event or a situation, especially if there's a trigger that they feel concerned about. And this often happens with people that work in front lines. So when we look at our businesses, we see all kinds of things in Cape Breton. When we see frontline workers, we might come into contact every day with folks that are doing these things. So we may be hearing about situations, and even those can be triggering, and we're having recurring intrusive images about it. So it may not just be when you're sleeping, it may be that you're playing some games with the kids, and then all of a sudden these images are going in your mind and you don't know why. So for those folks that are either working from home or perhaps some of their work they have to bring at home, what does that look like? Because some of the stress that's going with this for the business community, it's not just about work, it's not just about your job. Right now with this pandemic, we have almost like a number of things that are happening all at once. So if you're having a family and you're a parent, then that means you are parenting full time. There's no such thing as the kids going to school. So you have to be the teacher. You're doing the parenting. You're trying to balance working from home. And this can be very challenging to try to figure out how to manage all of that. So some of the things that we can do while we're working from home, try to see if you can find a place where you can minimize distractions. And that can be very challenging, especially if there's two people that are working at home. Maybe there's two partners and they're both working from home and everyone's trying to find a place. And if you don't have a home office, that can be very challenging. So it might be the kitchen table that you're doing your work. It might be your bedroom. But again, do your best just to try to minimize distractions so that when you need to focus, you can do that. Now, as we all can see with things like the webinars and other things that we're kind of leaning on, technology has both pros and cons. So there's some good things about the technology, like for example, the fact that we can still virtually keep in contact with people that we love, with people that we care about. Maybe people are enjoying things like house party or more FaceTimes. But some of the downsides about that is that it makes it really difficult to be able to leave your work at home and shut down and to be able to focus when you get home. Another downside of the technology issue is that sometimes this can be information overload. So depending on the kind of job you have, you may be learning so many different things that you've never really had to do before when it comes to technology. And this can be a real sense of being very overwhelming. And again, the information overload can be exhausting. So having said all that, taking breaks is very important. We need to take breaks from our work. Sometimes we need to take emotional breaks. And people forget sometimes that while they're working from home, they're just plugging along and maybe they've forgotten to eat lunch or dinner, but take those breaks, get up and stretch. And maybe you need to do things like schedule that and put that right in your phone so that your alarm goes off and you realize you have to take those breaks. That comes to my next point about how to plan your day. It's very different than it was before. So I would really encourage you to get up and try to figure out what do you need to have accomplished today. Write your list, figure out what you need to do. What are the things that you must do? And there may be things that you want to have accomplished, and there may be other days that you have to figure out, you know what, I'm going to have to see what is the most important things I need to accomplish, and there's other things I may have to let go. So again, plan your day, but also realize that even through the best plans, it doesn't always work the way that you want it to. And again, when we're dealing with children and teens and you're a parent, it's about trying to find that balance. And how do we balance between family members? Because we have to remember that as parents, when we are distressed, the distress can be very contagious to other people that are in the household, and they can pick up on how we're feeling very easily, even without us saying anything. So I have a 14-year-old son, and if I'm upset about something, he may just walk out into the kitchen, and I think he's in his own little world half the time, and he might just look at me and just say, Mom, what's wrong? What's going on? And he knows right away that I'm distracted or I'm stressed. So again, just keep in mind that when we're dealing with our children and our teens, we do have to be very careful about how we balance all of that. And the other point is, how do we stay connected? How do we stay connected with folks that are not living in our house? The folks that are outside of our family, our immediate family. Again, that's very important to try to stay connected, especially with the positive influences in your life that kind of make you laugh and make you smile. When we're dealing with times where we are stressed and there's traumatic events going on and we have so much extra work, we tend to neglect our very, very basic necessities. This is the time when we actually need to remember to concentrate on our basic necessities. So when we're looking at practical considerations, things like eating healthy is so important. It is really so much easier to run out and grab a slice of pizza or to grab some fast food and bring it home. It's so much healthier though if we can eat some whole healthy food. So even if you have to go out and make some quick runs, try to do your best to include like a variety of kinds of foods. Try to make sure that you're maintaining a healthy balance. So try to get the fruits and vegetables in. Try to make sure that you're eating balanced meals. And that comes to my next point of trying to drink lots of water. It is so easy to put on a pot of coffee in the morning and continue to drink things like caffeinated beverages, whether it's coffee or tea, or again, maybe more alcohol. But trying to increase your water levels and drink lots of water is important because we don't want to become dehydrated, and that impacts us in a variety of ways. Now, my next point is about sleep. And I know I touched on that before. Getting a good night's sleep is imperative when we are already under distress. Sleep is often the first thing that goes. Many times I hear people say that sleep deprivation is probably their number one concern when they're coming in for counseling. And it's trying to figure out, how do I get that back on track? There's a reason why sleep deprivation is still the number one form of torture in war-torn countries. And it's because it wreaks havoc on our minds, on our bodies. When we are not sleeping, it's hard for anything else to feel like it's not out of sorts. So again, my next point about limiting alcohol, I know, again, I touched on that before, but not that I see anything wrong with, going and having a glass of wine or having a couple of beer, but you know yourself and you know what your limit is and you know what you're okay with and what may be creeping up to be too much alcohol. Keep in mind that when we drink, alcohol is also a depressant. So if you're already feeling distressed and you're feeling sad about some of the events that have been going on and you're upset about the fact that we can't get out on a beautiful day, remember that the more alcohol that we drink, the more it increases the feelings of sadness. So just keep that in mind. During these times, I hear some people that are saying, well, this is great. I'm having some time to exercise. I'm going to try some different routines. I hear other people that say, look, I'm somebody that I love going to the gym. And if I can't go to the gym, there's no point to me trying to exercise at home because it's too difficult. I'm trying to do exercise and the kids are interfering. But again, trying to look at, instead of just looking at it as exercise, look at it as, how do I do some things to increase my movement? What are some things that I can do to practice, like yoga, stretching, flexibility, increasing balance in your lives? So those things are extremely important. So some relaxation techniques that I just want to touch on quickly. There are several that I'm going to point out today. One is very simple. It's called deep breathing. Some people call it diaphragmatic breathing. Some people call it calm breathing. But it's a very simple way to try to get ourselves to a more calm place. So when we're doing deep breathing, the first thing is we want to take a nice deep belly breath. So you want to take a nice long deep breath in through your nose. You hold it for about 2 to 3 seconds and let it out through your mouth. So it looks something like this. When we're doing deep breathing, it's important to take a couple of seconds in between your next breath so that you don't overbreathe. So if you do this for about 10 breaths, it's something that can be very relaxing. There's another relaxation technique called progressive muscle relaxation, and that is done by trying to isolate the various muscles in our body, our muscle groups, and trying to really concentrate on the difference between what a tense muscle feels like and what a relaxed muscle feels like. And when we're doing that, we can either go from toe to head or head to toe, but you want to systematically go through each muscle in your body. So for example, if you're doing your right hand, you want to hold your muscle as tight as you can in your right hand, and you hold it tight for about 3 to 4 seconds, and then you release that muscle. And you try to notice the difference about what a tense muscle feels like and what a relaxed muscle feels like. And the reason why we do this is because our bodies often feel the stress in our muscles before we actually realize in our brains that we're stressed. So when we recognize this, we're able to do some things to try to get ourselves in a more relaxed state. That brings me to the next point of meditation or guided meditation, whatever one you're more comfortable with. For some folks, they may need a little bit more help, especially if you're beginning to try to learn to meditate. And guided meditation apps can be wonderful for this because they can guide you and they will kind of walk you through systematically what you need to do next. Mindfulness strategies are all about trying to bring us back to the present. When we're feeling very stressed about things, we're either future focused, where we're so worried about what's going to be happening next, or we're past focused, where we feel depressed or we feel like we're ruminating over things that we might have said or things that might have happened. When we are trying to use mindfulness strategies, it brings us back to the here and now. It brings us to the present. One of the key ways I do this is through using things through our senses. We can use our sense of sight, hearing, touch, taste. So using our senses are ways that we can bring us back to the here and now. And these are some of the mindfulness strategies that we talk about. One other strategy I want to discuss is just simply reducing our outside stressors. If you're somebody that likes to watch the news, that can be extremely distressing, especially if you're watching it right before bedtime. So keep that in mind if your sleep is not on track. When we want to reduce our outside stressors, you might want to limit the news, maybe some negative family or friends that are always only talking about bad things. And not that you have to cut them off and not speak to them at all, but just be mindful of how you're feeling after conversations. And you may want to try to increase more happiness into your life. I wanted to put up some guided relaxation resources. So there's some relaxation recordings that are on there. There's some guided meditations. There's some apps and websites for guided meditations, as well as some relaxation techniques for stress relief. So how do we manage stressors when we need to socialize virtually? Well, there's a number of ways. One, we can just pick up the phone and call somebody. Call somebody that you feel a connection with. Call somebody that you want to reach out to. Call somebody because you're worried about them and you want to check on them. Another one is just sending a simple text and trying to think of a couple of different people each day that you can just shoot a text to say, hey, I'm thinking about you. So using social media platforms for face-to-face can be something that is innovative. It can be something that we try to get a group of us that are maybe playing a game together on a Friday night. There's a number of things I've seen, like for example, I've seen some trivia games that are done on a Friday night socially. Some people are playing some different board games and doing it socially. So again, try to use some of those social platform medias for that face-to-face interactions. When we're very stressed like this, the more we're able to keep up our regular routines, and socializing with other people is often one of those for many people. Keep that in mind, that that's a way that we can do it, and we can be innovative about the approach that we take. So what are some other creative ways to your well-being, just to kind of sum it up? Get up and shower and dress. Have your routine. And even if you're wearing your pajamas for the day, get a shower, put on a clean pair. If you want to wear comfy clothes, there's nothing wrong with that, but just try to have a routine and be mindful of when you are dressed and you're showered, you just feel better about yourself. When you're working from home, try to keep your routine and set your alarms. If you're waking up at different times every day, or your meal times are all messed up, just try to see if you can have a routine. And for those of you that are still out in the community, again, keeping that routine is important as well, because everything probably looks very different than it normally does. So the businesses, one of the things that I'm seeing is that they have to work very differently than they did before. This can create a lot of stress and wreak havoc for some people's lives. Again, try to keep in mind how important it is to have some kind of a routine, drinking that water. Again, increasing your movement and trying to get out to exercise and getting out to get some fresh air. When you're exercising, you're releasing positive endorphins that make us naturally feel better. So it can be really helpful. So whether you do it outdoors, indoors, some light housework sometimes can be a way to increase your movement. Make a list and clean one thing or space per day. Try to tend to something growing or living, whether it's pets, plants, your children or loved ones. Concentrate on senses for mindfulness. So as I was talking about it before, things like sound, song, whether it's just taking a small piece of chocolate and mindfully eating that chocolate. And when you're eating it, you can smell the smell, you can taste the taste, you can feel the chocolate. Have a nice cup of herbal tea. So something that you can sit and enjoy it and feel the heat go through your body. Again, looking at something natural, spiritual. Reach out to somebody outside of your home, especially if you know that they could benefit from a friendly ear. The more that we're able to help other people, it is something that makes us feel good. So if you know a neighbor is stuck and they can't get out of their house, maybe offer to go and buy them some groceries. Or maybe if you're thinking about meal planning, you might be able to make a meal and send it to somebody. Again, even though it's important to keep informed and you want to stay up to date on what is happening with the COVID-19 or maybe some of the relief funds that are going out for businesses, this is all very important. But you want to be able to balance how you minimize your time watching news, social media, etc., and balance that with taking those breaks, especially the negative communications. You may want to minimize that. And if you can at all, find some ways to laugh. Find somebody that you enjoy laughing with and take that time, because laughter is really something that makes us feel better. If we want to support other people, we can listen to them without judgment or criticism. So everybody thinks that they know how to listen, but really listening without judging or without criticizing somebody is more challenging. Try to control your reactions, because oftentimes people are looking for you to see how they should be responding to a situation. So try to control your reaction so that the person can speak without feeling judged. Watch for strains in your relationships. Oftentimes when we're stressed out, our relationships are the first thing that often gets strained. It may be with our loved one, it may be with a family member, but we may be snapping at people. We may be short with the kids. So watch for those strains in our relationships. Again, reach out and offer practical support. Share some of the relief strategies that you're learning about. They're changing daily, as we know. Some folks may not be on top of it as others. So knowing that you can share something with a friend is so important. I have a really great friend who's been sharing all of the different relief efforts that she believes could be helpful for me and my family. And I know that's something that I really appreciate. So again, reach out, offer that practical support. When somebody brings over something for lunch, it feels so nice to know that people care. And in all of that, remember to practice self-care. When we're so worried about everybody else, we often forget to look after ourselves. And it may sound very basic, but remember, self-care is not selfish. So looking after ourselves is key in some of this. When children are worried, if you want to learn some ways to speak to children, number one, try to keep it very simple. Be very honest with them. Try not to hide the truth from them. but remember their age, remember their developmental stage, and try to keep it at a level that they can understand. If someone is sick that you know of, or if they're worried about a vulnerable person, maybe they're worried about a grandparent, just remember to try to remain calm and provide reassurance if you can. And if you can't, try to be honest, but remember to give them the information that they can handle. Encourage children to express their concerns and ask questions. And if they tell you what their fears are, try not to dismiss their feelings. Try not to dismiss their fears. Try to encourage them, again, to get involved and have some fun with family time and movies. And try to model some of that behavior, because the more they see from you, the more, I said before, that it can be, as much as distress can be contagious, so can laughter, and so can fun. That can be contagious as well. And trying to balance our work times around kids' homework, downtime for children, wellness check-ins, they can be very, very taxing. So remember to, again, try to keep some balance with that. And be alert to any major changes that you might observe in your children. And if they need you, again, try to make yourself available. I wanted to put in some additional supports, and I'm sure many of you are very aware of these, especially the top one for Canada's Economic Response Plan, which many of you know where that is located, but I wanted to put it up there anyway. But there's some extra numbers that people may not think about until you are at a time where you feel like you need it, or you could pass that on to somebody that could benefit from it. And the other thing I wanted to quickly mention was that Morneau Shepell had opened its 24/7 bilingual crisis support line to help anyone in need of emotional support as the result of our tragic events in Nova Scotia. And I listed that number as well. So that's it for my presentation. I want to thank you for tuning in and encourage you all to try to do your best to stay well, both physically and emotionally. And again, remember, we are all in this together, and the more we support each other, the better we're going to do when we come out of this.
All right, thank you very much, Helen. I think you really started us off with some great insights into stress and how to handle it, and just how to get through this time. For those of you who were watching and wondering about all the resources that she posted, we are going to be putting up the slides after the fact when we post the webinar, so you'll be able to actually go through those and access them all.
Good.
All right, so next up is Natasha Polomsky. Natasha is a bioenergetic wellness facilitator, and she runs her own business, Turn Up the Frequency. Natasha, thanks for being here today, and you can take it away.
Thank you for having me. So give me a sec. I'm just gonna start my PowerPoint. Here it goes. Okay. So I'm coming from a little bit of different background, and I'm trying to talk today about complementary approaches to mindful and happier life, which for me means I come from the business field. I have two businesses that are my own. One is business administrational services for other companies, and one is complementary and alternative health methods that are based on an approach of sound, frequency, and vibration combined with bioenergetic feedback. And I'm a Master of Science student in complementary and alternative medicine. I'm in the process of getting into my thesis. I'm publicity chair with 2 bioenergetic wellness associations, and I am a burnout survivor. My background is 20 years plus burnout, to the point that I was surviving but not living anymore. And a lot of my experiences and the things I share come out of that healing process that I went through. Why turn up the frequency? We all vibrate at a certain frequency, and our life energy can be influenced by more than we're actually aware of. That can actually include things like color, sound, food. Everything has a frequency, and that can lower our body frequency. And that would mean then actually that it's your focus that's impaired, or your patience, you get irritable, you get your creativity sinks and your mood will be usually on the bad side, because it's just like this nagging feeling that won't let you go. Higher energy, if your vibration is higher, you'll be calmer, you'll be more happy, you will be more grateful, and everything will be easier and flowing. Color-wise, for instance, the color you're sitting in front of, the clothes you wear, paintings on your wall, all of those can have influence on your energy, because if you don't resonate with it, it won't allow you to raise your frequency, and it won't allow you to stay on a higher level. The same is with sound, and the same is for foods. I'm not saying you should be sitting in silence. My point is, find whatever makes you happy. The influence on mental health is lower frequency is more stressors for the body, because whatever comes into our field will lower the energy that we have. The body reacts, the body is more stressed out, the mind is trying to coping with all the alarms that are going off in excess to what's going on anyway, and that creates again lower frequency. So it's a vicious cycle that, if you're not paying attention to that, can bring you down to a point where you get really sick. Mens sana in corpore sano is the Latin word or Latin saying for a healthy mind and a healthy body. It's always been put together with physical health, but it's more than that. It's physical, spiritual, and mental health all in one. So if you're off in one point, it will always be off in another one too. You need balance in your life with all three cycles. How can we support us? Be aware and pay attention to your body. The interesting part is that our intuition is our first and foremost alarm system, and it can tell you so much more than you're aware of. And unfortunately, we are, the older we get, the more we rely on our brain telling us, or our mind telling us what's wrong, and it's not really that. It's more the body telling us and talking to us, and that's our intuition and insight. But we're just looking on the outside, on all the clues outside, and not paying attention to what's going on inside. If we're consciously deciding to be self-responsible to the point that we are changing our wording, that we are careful what we watch, careful what input we take in, and all of those things, if we change to a happy life and a grateful life, the frequency is higher, because all those negative thoughts and negativity that's in our life right now anyway, but even on a small level every day in a normal life and not in the crisis we're now, that will lower our frequency. But if you change consciously to pick the happier thoughts or the more positive wording, for instance, one of the favorite ones is I don't like, I hate. Freak that again. That's wording that I'm very familiar, because that was a part of my life, to the point that I listened to myself finally and I said, that's not me. So I decided to change to thank you for the challenge. I love the lesson. And those tiny changes in your wording can create a totally different atmosphere for you and energetic base for you that makes it way easier to cope. The next thing is put yourself first, is self-care. We are so used to take care of everybody else and to care about anybody else that we neglect ourselves. So if you're, if you can put the time into, ladies, put the facial in, for the men, even if you just sit down and rub your feet for 5 minutes, that's self-care, taking time for yourself and being aware that it's not just work and business and all of those things, but the tiny things that we do for ourselves today are the ones that keep us way more focused and way more energetic in any other way. The last part that I want to put in there in this support area is bioenergetic feedback. Our body, as I said, can tell us way more than we're thinking, and it's a way, pretty much the best effective way to ask your body what it needs. So if I just quickly explain what I personally use as a method to give my body a voice. One is the body pendulum, where you are standing with your knees unlocked and you challenge your energy field by a question or putting something in front of your navel, and your body will sway. So there's different ways to do that. One of the common one is you look for a yes/no answer, and then you have a different movement depending on if that's serving you or not. For instance, the question is that food served now or not. You can check the yes and no answer by saying your name, and you will have one movement. And if you use Rumpelstiltskin, which is a favorite because nobody relates to that name, you will have a different movement. This movement with your name is the positive, the yes, while the movement with your Rumpelstiltskin is the no. So you have a yes and no answer. So you can take a glass of pop, put it in front of you, and ask, will this give me energy? Or will this energetically be supporting me through the day for an hour or whatever? So the question has to be formed in the right way. And if anybody's interested, you can come back to me and I'll tell you more about that. But that way you can find out what's really supporting you through the day or through the work you have. But you can also ask, for instance, which supplements. And careful with that. I wouldn't go with any supplements that are not prescribed to you, but you can check if it's the right time to take them. And things like that can help to bring you in a better vibrational state. The other thing you can use is the finger method, and that's using 2 fingers by pulling on each other. And I always say, try it first by pulling through. So you have the feeling what it feels like when you move your fingers through, but then hold strong with one hand and try to pull the other one through. If I say yes, it holds strong. And if I say no, I can't hold that. So that's very easy methods that you can use at home to test for instance, go to the fridge and see what's in the fridge and see what of the variety you have in your fridge will be the best for you at that moment. The next one is, what can you ask? For instance, how long will your energy or will the energy last with a certain task before it's depleted? So if I sit down and I have to write right now my papers, I can ask, how long can I do that before I'm completely worn out? Which then gives me the possibility to actually work effectively for the time that I have the energy, then take a break, replenish my energy and come back and be done faster instead of just dragging myself through the task and try to get to the point where I'm so exhausted that I'm not able to focus anymore. You can ask, how long do we need to rest? Rest period is important. Most people just crash on the couch or sleep, deeper sleep for an hour on the couch or 2 and get up and say, I can't get back into work. Einstein had a very neat method to just get a quick nap. He would he would sleep sitting down in a chair, and he would have a spoon in his fingers. And as soon as he would go into deep sleep, the spoon would fall down and he would be awake. That's usually 10 to 15 minutes, which is enough to get a really, really good rest, then being able to keep on going. Because if you go into deep sleep, you won't be able to really come out of it until you're done resting, as long as you need. What food will support us most optimal at the moment and long term? So instead of, oh, I feel like eating a lot of wheat, or I feel like the pasta dishes that are at home and I have the sauces, I'll just make that. It's easy, it's fast, it will feed me. Instead of that, as I said, go to the fridge and muscle test or muscle monitor, which is the correct term, muscle monitoring. see how long or what will give you the best support in foods so your energy is optimized and high, instead of getting the quick fix and then having the big drop because your blood sugars will fall down. The next one, very important, and most people don't realize that, is centering. Centering is a way to bring us from the outside inside. So all our input usually is from the outside. We have noises around us, we have vibration, we have the fridge humming or kids playing, whatever. There's every time there's outside input that will make us become more overwhelmed, and we don't have time to listen inside and see what's really going on. And centering is the conscious act of checking in with oneself and picking up the conversation. So checking into your body and see what is going on, and to realize, where am I tight? What does my body really feel like? Is it tense? Is it relaxed? Can I just go on? It doesn't take much time, but it cuts out the outside distractions and gives you a moment to refocus and to breathe. And centering is very easy if you don't overthink or start to use a lot of words. So the exercise that I would suggest is you close your eyes and focus your perception towards your middle and center, and become aware of what your senses are telling you. So what is really, what is your sense of smell when you focus inside? What do you really feel like? When you close your eyes, how do your eyes react? Are they tired? Do you still see lights, or is it calming, or is it more distracting? All of those tiny little things that you usually don't pay attention to. And then you start to breathe deeply but naturally into your center, and continue to monitor your senses, and just see what that does by focusing on them and breathing deeply. How that changes, how your feet feel different, how your posture changes, all of those things. If you then create a blue ball or blue-green ball of peace and calm in your center, and the colors are not that important. If blue and green doesn't work for you, pick another color. Just for you, whatever for you presents that peace and calm. Create that in your center and become aware of the effects of it in your system. And then pack all your fears and worries into that ball, and feel what changes. Usually when we put them in a bubble like that, they will lessen. They won't be as focused, they won't be as much. The next thing is you now direct your breathing out of your feet into the ground, and see how that then again changes your sensation in your body. And once you're done that for a couple of minutes, and it doesn't have to be long, like 2 or 3 or 4, you just open your eyes and see where you are, but your mind will be calm, because the exercise will take the focus from everything that's going on around you and shaking you up to your center and bringing you stability. The other part that's going with that, or is adding on to that, would be grounding. And energy is supposed to flow freely throughout your body, and you're usually or in the, and only when energy is able to flow freely, you'll be able to be calm and peaceful, because your body and mind won't be in that tense state of it should go but it doesn't go, and it's like a dam building up and creating more and more tension in you. Stagnating energy, aggravating as a tripping faucet, and low energy will make you sluggish and sleepy. Again, building up energy in your body when it's not moving, or even if it's not coming in enough, this is buildup of energy is always like you're starting to vibrate, and you're getting like this tension and nothing is going anywhere. While if there's not enough energy coming in, you have no power, you have nothing, you're just getting into the state where you're like, yeah, not here, not there. Grounding is the conscious sorry. Give me a sec. Grounding is the conscious direction of energy through your body and out of your feet. I'm really sorry about that. So if you direct the energy out of your feet, the flow will be increasing. And you can actually increase that by getting out and put your feet on the ground. And bare feet, because there's an exchange between the earth and your body. Additional tips are, again, as Helen said, set a routine, because it's important that you can take breaks. But if you need if you use your body pendulum or your biofeedback as the tool to set the routine, it becomes more effective. Take breaks. Pay attention to what makes you smile. Smiling is the most important part of the world, because when you smile, it makes you happy, it raises your frequency. Exercise to remove tension, and go out into nature, sit in the sun and hug a tree. Yes, I'm a tree hugger. Again, you're exchanging energy with something that's living. We can't hug people right now, so hugging a tree or a pet is the next best thing. And if you have any questions, sorry, you can contact me. My information is here, and I'll be working on some programs to come up the next few weeks as videos or online webinars or something like that. So sorry again for the cough. It happens.
Well, I hope you're okay, but thank you very much for your presentation. I think you gave us a really interesting perspective, and you gave people some, I think, probably new tools and concepts that they can take away and hopefully apply to their lives. So with that wrapped up, we're going to move into the question period. So please, if you do have any questions, send them our way and we'll pass them along and hopefully get them answered. And it looks like we have one sitting here so far. So the question is, what prevents people from grounding or calming themselves? So if people have never meditated before, how would you suggest that they get over the newness of doing something that they've never tried previously? And I think, Natasha, probably that applies particularly to you, but I know, Helen, you spoke about some things like meditation. So
one of the things that's preventing us is most times we're working a lot, or we're using a lot of wearing a lot of shoes. That's one thing. So, and a lot of the soles nowadays are plastic. Plastic doesn't allow for energy flow. So, and we don't walk barefoot, and we're not conscious. We're so much in our mind that we don't allow for the flow. Tense muscles can prevent energy flow. So consciously directing flow down to the earth, or the energy into the earth, that's grounding, and it's easy. It's just we don't do it consciously. And if anybody thinks about how often they walk really barefoot out on the grass or earth or whatever, most people don't do that anytime, unless you go to the beach. And how often have we been to the beach now? The other part is, if you have never meditated, it's not hard. If you listen to a humming sound or chants, Gregorian chants is meditation. The focus on that is to allow yourself being focused on that sound and just allow the vibration to get into you. when I started meditation, we had breathing exercises. I was breathe in 1, breathe out 1, breathe in 2, breathe out 2. You would count till 10 and then start over. Usually you don't get to that point. You do that quite often because you keep on counting. But once you learn to stop at 10 and start again at 1, it becomes a different rhythm. I use singing bowls, so I don't have to really sit down and focus my mind on what I need to do. I just take the singing bowl and tap it. I have metal ones. Those have the quality that they pull you in. They entrain with your brain, they resonate with you, and you're just floating with that, and you're meditating if you want it or not, because you're just, nothing else is important. For me, the worst part in meditation was that I was told I have to clear my mind. And if you tell me there's no pink elephant in the room, I tell you it's there. I can't do that. But with the singing bowls, I've learned that I just have to let go of those zones. So don't hold on to anything that comes into your mind. Just let it go. It's not important at that thing, at that moment. The breathing, if you can start breathing, focusing on the breathing, it's just to get your focus into yourself and off everything that's outside of you.
All right, excellent, thank you. So it is 3, but I think we can give a little more time for questions. And at this point, I think it would be a good time to pop up our poll. So we do like to just do a short evaluation for everyone, just so you can give us your feedback, and so we can know a little bit more about what we might need to do in future webinars. So if you don't mind filling that out, that would be great. It should be popping up on your screen now. And then we can move on to some more questions.
So I have a quick question for Helen. Helen, something that you had said about changing up your clothes and all that kind of thing, I think that struck me, because there are so many days where you kind of, you do go through your routine and you wear the same kind of thing or whatever. And when you get a little stale with that, suddenly I've noticed in myself that I start to be a little more sluggish. I'm less energetic. I'm more prone to negativity and negative thoughts, and probably not being as positive and productive as a day where I'm starting fresh. I'm going to have a completely new wardrobe on me today, and all that kind of thing. I'd love if you could talk a little bit about ways that we can all remind ourselves of that when we go forward, because I'm sure we all know it, but it's tough to remind ourselves, I guess.
You're right, it is. And it can be a challenge for all of us, right? I noticed today even trying to wear some makeup because I was going to be seen today as opposed to so many other days. But again, when we get up and we shower and we put some clothes on, when we look better, we feel better, right? So whatever your routine is, just trying to, not that you have to get up and wear your business clothes every day, but you might just want to make sure that you're, like I said, even wearing a clean pair of pajamas if you want to wear your pajamas. But look at, what you're doing, and maybe you want to put on a comfortable pair of pants and a comfortable top, but try to mix it up and try to feel just good about yourself. Because at the end of the day, when we ask ourselves, who are we looking good for? When you hear that sometimes, I really hope that the answer is going to be, we do it for ourselves. We do the things that we do because we want to feel better. So if we feel better, I notice even if I, by the time I finish working out, if I feel gross and then I go grab a shower, when I come out, it's just like, oh God, I feel so much better because I'm clean, and that might be it. But again, it's just trying to make sure that this is about us, because if we're not feeling good, then that really comes down to how we're presenting, and it's a vicious cycle. When we think better, we feel better. And when we feel better, we do better.
Thank you. I agree.
There's another question here for Natasha. It says, Natasha, are you a trained bioenergetic therapist? And do you offer bioenergetic therapy in the Cape Breton area?
So I am trained in sound balance. In Germany, I've trained touch for health, therapeutic touch, and some different modalities. And yes, I work in the bioenergetic field, and I'm a member of Can Be Well, the Canadian Bioenergetic Wellness Association, that creates standards for bioenergetic wellness facilitators.
Awesome. All right,
And I'm found in Port Hawkesbury, so just to let you know.
great. So we've got another question in the chat as well. It says, first, thank you for the information. And the particular issue that they're interested in is how you can control emotions with our children.
Sorry, control emotions with our children, is that?
Yeah, so I think presumably going back to what you were talking about when you were stressed and maybe not reacting in good positive ways around your kids, how can you kind of control those emotions?
Yeah, and some days that can be harder than other days, right? If we want to be realistic, I don't know any parent, and I've got 4 kids, so I can really appreciate the challenges of trying to stay focused when it comes to parenting. And not all of us are going to feel good every day. We're going to have our down days. We also have to appreciate that, you know what, kids are little humans too, and they're going to have their down days. So I recall there was one day my 15-year-old daughter come upstairs, and she looked like she was kind of in a mood. And my only thought is like, okay, so she's having a crappy mood, and we've all had them. And when my partner was saying, geez, like, you know, do you think you should talk to her? What's going on? Part of it is that we also have to give some space. So again, everything is about age appropriateness. So it depends on the age of your child. It depends on the nature of your child, because you know your child, each one of them are different. And, you know, considering I've had 4 kids, there's not 2 of them that have the same types of personalities. But one of the things I think is important is, again, doing those check-ins with the kids just to see how they're doing. Sometimes with younger kids, we have to mix things up a little bit. So it's about creating some space for them to let off some of their energy, because they all need to let off their energy. And again, remember the feelings that when I talked about feelings are contagious, I think modeling is so important. If our kids are anxious, for example, we may need to look at, okay, what are we projecting, right? Because we need to model for our kids. So how are we handling things? If we're always talking negatively about, oh, I can't believe this happened, or did you see the way that happened? Well, that's going to come off with our children, and they're going to mimic us. So sometimes being self-aware, what am I presenting to the kids? And none of us are perfect, and understand that and know that and accept that, but ask ourselves that. So remember, laughter is contagious just as much as negativity is contagious.
Probably good to remember that the children that are at home with everyone are, for some people, they're coworkers right now in a lot of ways.
Exactly. Ones that didn't apply for the job.
My suggestion would be on that also to before you start answering or before you catch yourself reacting, take a breath. Mm-hmm. Step back, take a breath, and even try to see it from their perspective, not from yours. And as annoying as it can be that somebody comes to you and wants something, usually there's a need behind that, right? So if you put yourself in their shoes, you change your perspective on what's going on. And oftentimes, I don't have children, but I have friends with children, and I end up taking them. But oftentimes, I find we catch ourselves being annoyed with something that reflects on us in some way, but we don't really step back and step out of ourselves and take a look at what's going on in the whole situation. And taking that breath before you start yelling or being snarky or whatever, just take a step back, breathe, and take a second to think about what's going on here. And sometimes that takes that's all it needs to take the tension out of the situation, right?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So we've got another question from Dawn, and she says, I think we all recognize the need to be and stay positive, but can you expand on when you have a negative emotion or reaction? How do you feel about allowing that emotion? So she says, I think sometimes we take some of the advice as trying to stay away from any negative feelings. What do you both think?
I mean, I can start, Natasha, if you want. I think that we have to recognize that we are all entitled to a variety of emotions. One of the things that, especially with my my university students, when I was seeing them, I would say to them, I don't know if you've ever watched the movie Inside Out, because if you're a parent with young children, you might have seen it, but I think it's something that is applicable to people of all ages. one of the things that we see in society right now is that we're always trying to stay positive. Oh, don't talk about bad things. Don't say bad things. We have to realize we're all human and we're all real, and we need to have all of these emotions. So if you're having a down day, let yourself have the down day. But again, it goes back to balance. Give yourself that time. If you need to grieve something, you have to go through it. And that means sometimes just grieving the lost job or the change in job, all of that stuff. It's okay to be feeling negative. If that lasts for too long or it's consuming our lives, that's when we may need to take notice and say, okay, what can I do? Where can I go for help if it's starting to become a pattern?
I agree with Helen the same way. You have to have your down days, and we're the same. Like, I don't take myself out of that picture. For me, it changed with changing my overall approach of life. So as soon as I started to find gratitude in the small things in my life and happiness in my life, when I have a downtime, it doesn't take that long. It might be a day, I might be in tears, and that's fine. I'll let that come, but I still try to find in it other things that I can be grateful for and other things that make me happy. So to not wallow in that focus, to yes, let it come through, and yes, live it, because emotions have to be lived. You can't keep them inside, and they're tearing you apart. You have to let them out, and it's fine if you have a cry day, cry. You need it, but don't fall into that part where you're not getting out of it. And if I'm a person that's constantly saying, I can't achieve anything, I won't be anything, and whatever, it's not true. If you look at whatever you accomplished about in your whole life, there is accomplishments in there, because you didn't get to where you are without doing things. And you have your strengths and you have your weaknesses. But be grateful for your weaknesses as a lesson, instead of playing into them and making yourself a victim of whatever is keeping you down.
All right, thanks to both of you for that one. I think that was really insightful. Next is a question specifically for Natasha. It says, can Natasha suggest resources on the theory of frequency and energy for beginners? It sounds so interesting.
So one of the pages or websites I would send you to is Can Be Well, the Canadian Association for Bioenergetic Wellness. There's a whole bunch of wonderful people all over Canada that do all kinds of energy work, different ways, different approaches, and there's not one for all, which makes it so interesting that we're all working in the same field, but we're working all with different approaches. If you want more information, text me, email me, we can start chatting, whatever. It's an interesting field, and if you are really into it, one of the biggest, best, I'm just looking for the book, that's why. There's a book from James Oshman, which is the theory on energy medicine, and it covers quite a bit from a research point. He's a doctor. So that's one of the biggest things that I would start with, because it has all, and there's other books that I can recommend, but I would say just get in contact with me and I'll talk to you.
Great. And just a reminder for everybody, we will be putting the slides up, and I believe those have Natasha's contact information, so you'll easily be able to get in touch. All right, so we have one more question sitting here, and it says, how can you tell if your aches and pains are tension related, and how can we release the tension in those muscles?
Okay, I think earlier I was talking a little bit about progressive muscle relaxation, and one of the things I figured out in my own practice was that when I had to practice what I preached and started trying some of these methods for myself, I was somebody that had migraines all the time, and the medication that I was on was very potent. It was very severe. And when I started doing the progressive muscle relaxation, it probably took me quite a few tries, I can't lie, to actually get it down and to not quit and to not give up. And once I started really getting a hold of it, I feel like I can be more in touch now, and I can recognize when my muscles are more in distress because it's more tension. So for example, I tend to carry a lot of my tension in my neck, and I can really feel it, so then I can do those exercises a little bit more easily and more quickly. But some folks, it takes a long time to recognize that. But doing things like the yoga, I highly recommend, because it releases some of those aches and pains and tensions. And if you're somebody that is prone to different types of injuries, it can be so helpful in preventative medicine as well. But when we start doing the progressive muscle relaxation, you start to recognize the difference between your tense state and your relaxed state. And again, the more practice you get with it, the more you can recognize it, and you can feel that tension before your brain actually recognizes that you're in the stress that you're in.
Same here. If you check in with yourself, you will realize that if the pain is really, where are you tight in your body, right? And if you can work with that, I personally, when it's too much, like the tension is too much, I work with Epsom salts. Just dissolve them, put them on, because the magnesium is absorbed through the muscle right away through the skin. As I can't digest, very, very hardly digest magnesium orally, so that's my go-to. I do an Epsom salt foot bath in the morning, which helped with clenching my teeth. And the other thing is hot and warm moisture on the muscle. If that gives you relief on your tension, because a hot moist towel out of the microwave, put it on, and if that gives you relief on the tension, then it usually would be muscle related more than anything else. But we're not doctors. You have to go see a doctor if the pain is persisting, right? So that's always a individual thing where you have to be sure to talk to the person itself and see what's going on. And again, we as bioenergetic wellness, like I as a bioenergetic wellness facilitator, I'm not diagnosing you. I'm not allowed to. I'm not a medical person. I can talk to you, and I can see and tell you what my story was, and if it helps you, that's fine. But again, I'm not diagnosing you.
Excellent. Well, I think that
there's somebody that sent a question through. They said that they can't do it through Zoom. They wanted to know about people who are laid off through no fault of their own because of COVID. The feeling of not being useful, low self-esteem, that how can we as employers or friends, colleagues support these individuals? Is it okay to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and I think I've put a lot of resources on the presentation as well, but employers, if you have an EFAP program, it's so important to encourage people to be able to use that, and to recognize that if you do need to lay staff off during these times, that it is so vitally important to continue to let them know that they are valued, that you're not doing it because you want to do it. And that may be implied, and we may assume that somebody would know that, but doing the check-ins and letting them know that they're doing okay is so important. I know somebody who had lost their job due to COVID, at least temporarily, but one of the owners of the company who didn't oversee this person called personally and reached out and said, I just wanted to tell you how valuable you are. So again, it's that personal touch, it's letting them know, and it's being very honest about if there's information that you can give them about how long this may last. And if you don't know, you tell them that you don't know, but honestly, that this is what you're hoping for. And again, recognizing that there may be times that somebody may need to veer off and see, is this an opportunity as well? Maybe I do want to look for a change in my life. Maybe I need to consider other opportunities. So if that's where a person is, but trying to recall that for the individual that's laid off, it's not their fault, that they didn't cause this. This is not their fault. It's easier to say that than it is to really understand it.
The same for friends and families. If you talk to somebody and they are worried, please don't put them down with their worries, and don't say, oh, don't be like that. They have a valid point, and it's better to say I hear you than to say, oh, don't, get over it, right? So just phrase your wording the correct way, that you're supporting and not diminishing. That's the biggest part too, to support each other. And I do with friends of mine, I just check in and send a message and say, how are you, or hello sunshine, or whatever, just in the morning, good morning. And that alone will help sometimes for people to get through the day.
Yeah, that's very important.
And just remember, so many people, they feel valued in the work that they do. So if for whatever reason they're laid off of work or they're asked not to return, that makes people question their value. And we can't diminish that. I totally agree.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think that was our final question. So thank you for everybody who has been watching the webinar from home and sending your questions in. And a very special thank you to our hosts, Helen and Natasha. I think you've done an amazing job, and I think everybody's going away with some really great information about wellness and mental health. So as we've mentioned throughout, if you do have other questions, you can get in touch with us or with Natasha or Helen. And we are planning future webinar sessions still. So next week is the North American Occupational Safety and Health Week. So on Tuesday, May 5th, we'll be hosting a webinar called Occupational Health and Safety during COVID-19. And you can watch for details and registration on our websites and social media. Jeremy, do you have any other comments on the technical side?
No, not at all. Just that we should have today's recording and our slides up on our website and on social media tomorrow. So if your connection wasn't very good, or if you know of anyone that missed this session, please encourage them to take a watch. Or if you watched it today and you just need a reminder, feel free to tune in again and watch it all over again tomorrow and the next day and so on.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. And we look forward to seeing some of you at our future webinars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone.